Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we have a special movie-like event here for you all. For those of you who are fans of the Heroes of the Morphin Grid series, then I am proud to present to you a now feature-length audio film for the series Neon Genesis Evangelion, The Star of Hope, Power Rangers Zeo crossover Neon Genesis Evangelion. This is a special movie event, if you will, something that takes place between the ending of Part 8, but just before the epilogue that you hear in the ending of the video. This is a little special project that I've been doing for a while now. Nothing really too deep or anything special, but it was something that I've had in development, and it's something that I wanted to add to the series as a whole. Now, you do not have to watch this movie in particular with the other series, but if you want to have something to tie you over, something to enjoy, then this is something that's meant for you. I do want to say first and foremost thank you to everyone who supports PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. As always, I cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow as we are on the road to 2K and beyond. As always, if you haven't, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Without further ado, let's get into today's movie event. So, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Shinji would lie asleep in his bed, his mind drifting as he found himself in a different reality. He saw the things that could have been, the life that he could have lived. Unknown to Shinji, what he was indeed seeing was not a dream, but rather an alternate reality. Something you might refer to as the original timeline. He saw the world raptured by Third Impact. His friends, loved ones, all gone, all taken away. For Shinji, these dreams did not occur as often as they used to, but still they were powerful all the same. Every morning that he awoke, he would simply have to assure himself that this was not the life that he lived. No. In this line of events, Shinji's life took a different path. It all started the first day he arrived in Tokyo 3. After a rather unceremonious reunion with his father, he would attempt to pilot Ava Unit 1 for the first time, battling against creatures known only as angels. In the midst of the battle, Shinji feeling as though he were losing his mind, there would become the arrival of a certain someone. This arrival would change Shinji's life in a way that he never could have imagined. The person who arrived was a man by the name of Jason Lee Scott. You might know him as the Red Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. Although in this time of events, at this point in his life, he was the Zeo Ranger Gold. He was being chased by the generals of the Machine Empire, who had sworn loyalty to Lord Draken and were on a mission to steal the Zeo's Zords, the crystals, and the power for themselves. chasing him to another universe, as they had somehow managed to squeeze through a wormhole. Lord Dragon's campaign against the Power Rangers spanned across every universe, every reality, on all timelines. Through this change of events, Shinji's life would take a different turn. Not only did he continue his service as an Eva pilot, but he became the Red Zeo Ranger. With the help of his friends in Asuka and Rei, Toji and Kinsuke, they would become the Zeo Power Rangers. In the process, they would defeat the generals, as well as stopping Seilei's plans, and even his own father, from performing the third impact. In doing so, they had saved the world, and now it was being rebuilt. NERV operated in a different function now, serving as a defense force for the world, spearheaded by the Zeo Rangers. Misato, now taking the name of Lee Scott, having married Jason following the final battle against the generals. Both she and her husband would lead the Zeo Rangers, defeating what remained of their former enemy. That being a few cogs here and there, the robot foot soldiers of the Machine Empire. The Evangelion projects had long since been decommissioned, and the Evas were taken apart, disassembled, and destroyed. All the same, the world was finally starting to heal. Third impact had been avoided, and it seemed as though all of their enemies had been taken away. Of course, for Jason, he knew very obvious that Lord Draken still remained out there somewhere. It just would be a question of when he planned on coming. That was one thing that kept him up at night with fear. For as strong as his team had become, and for as much faith as he had in them, he knew that in due time, they would have to face against the Dark Ranger. And only time would tell if they would be strong enough when that day came. For the children, their living arrangements had changed as well. Misato and Jason decided that they needed their own space, but they wanted everyone to remain close. For a lot of them, they didn't really have any other family to turn to, or at least nowhere to really go, so they decided that they would make a way for them all to stay together. Thankfully, there was an apartment complex not too far from NERV headquarters. While Misato and Jason would have one suite to themselves, they had arranged for each child to have an apartment of their own. They all lived on the same floor, of course, and when it came to things like dinner and breakfast and so on, they would all usually meet at the Scott residence, unless they wanted to be alone in their own apartments. But this way, everyone was able to stay together and be close, allowing for their friendships to continue to grow in the meantime. Of course, Misato and Jason had to be responsible for their charges, making sure the kids weren't up to anything too inappropriate, to say the least. But nothing like that ever really happened, so there was nothing truly to worry about. For the most part, everything seemed to be going just fine. And on this day, it would be like any other. Although, this day was one that had much significance to it. Both Shinji and Rei would be a little late getting home that afternoon, as there was somewhere they needed to stop. They would go to a graveyard. There would be two tombstones, one in honor of Yui Ikari, and the other for Gendo Ikari. For both Shinji and Rei, their relationship was unique, to say the least. With Rei's secret and her origin coming to full life, Shinji took upon himself to watch after Rei, viewing her like a sister that he never had. The two of them had close ties to Gendo Ikari and Yui, but for much different reasons. Rei was a clone of Gendo's late wife, and well, for Shinji, his father was, well, not someone that you could necessarily call father to begin with. As they both stood there, both of them trying to come to grips with the life that they live now, trying to figure out where they fit into this world. Everyone knew why Shinji and Rei were going to be late, and they made sure not to bring it up. After all, when they had become aware of Gendo Ikari's true plans, and how he too wanted to initiate Third Impact, it was hard to look at him the same. Granted, in the final battle, he did show the ultimate sacrifice of a father, giving up his life by piloting Eva Unit 1 to save his son in his battle against the generals. But all the same, they knew that even that one act of kindness could not erase all of the atrocities that Gendo had caused. All of the experiments, the murders, everything that he had done to get to where he was at that point in his life. These were things that could not easily be overlooked, but at the same time, they wondered just how much they could really judge the man. After all, he wanted to be with his wife, and one could look at that and say that that was a noble cause. But on the other hand, the road that he took to get there was one that could never be forgiven. At least, only one person had the right to forgive, or maybe two. For Shinji, he wasn't sure how to feel about his father. What could he possibly say about the man? He died doing something that a father should do, but yet, what allowed him to get to that point? Was it because he truly felt regret, remorse? Did he do it because he felt that was something his wife would have wanted him to do? Or did he think that it was just the most logical step to take, now that his plans had gone to absolute hell? Shinji honestly couldn't tell in that moment. He may simply never know what his father was truly thinking. And like that, he doubted that he could ever truly understand him. Although for now he tried to make his peace, and just hope that he would find some comfort or solace in all of this. In the meantime, there was discussion amongst the Rangers about doing something for Rei. She never actually had a birthday of her own, and they decided they wanted to at least throw her a party of sorts. They knew that their fellow comrade and friend, the Yellow Zeo Ranger, Rei Ayanami, was trying to readjust to her life in this world. Being a clone, and one of many, being raised to be devoid of any personality, of any feeling, of any emotion, and now being thrust into a new world where she would have to learn how to experience such things, and how to keep them under her own control. There were those who wondered if she were really up for the task. Not that they didn't believe or have faith in her, but they just knew that this was something that was not going to be easy. But still though, for their friend and for everything that she had done for them, they knew that they owed her to try and to do their best. And so they were all in agreement. But still though, they were a bit excited for planning the party, to try to make her feel more comfortable, so to speak. As they did so, Shinji would also have another problem at hand. Not so much a problem in the beginning, but rather It was something that he could feel. He would go to sleep at night, and when he did so, he would come face to face with him, a being who was half green and half purple. He seemed as though he were wearing a suit of some kind, but Shinji couldn't tell what it was. The man would say nothing. His suit and color scheme similar to that of Eva Unit 1. He would cause nothing but destruction and chaos all around him, and Shinji would see the bodies of his friends strewn all throughout the streets. And yet it always ended the same way every time. Shinji reaching out desperately for Asuka, her fingers being just inches away from his own, only for her to be pulled away into the darkness. The last thing Shinji would hear were her desperate screams, begging for help, pleading. And Shinji would usually wake up in a cold sweat, unsure of if what he experienced were merely a dream or the signs of things to come. That was something that he honestly just couldn't tell anymore. The next day, Shinji would go to school with everyone else. The night before, they had had a very serious talk with Jason and Misato. Jason explained that as the kids got older, they might feel that they were obligated to stay Rangers forever, that this might be the only path for them. However, Jason made it very clear that they were free to do whatever they wanted. If they felt the time came where they needed to leave, they were more than welcome to, and no one would cast any judgments upon them. If they didn't want to be a Ranger, they didn't have to be. It was up to them to make their own lives what they wanted. Although, they were all allowed to keep their morphers. There was something that could not be taken from them. But all the same, no matter what road they chose to take in life, both he and Misato promised to be supportive and to do everything in their power to help them. As Shinji sat in class, he would look out his window, not really paying much attention to the teacher or what he was saying. But as he had looked out for the third time, standing in the forest near the school itself, under a tree, Shinji rubbed his eyes, believing that he had saw something that couldn't possibly be real. He saw the man from his dreams. But that couldn't possibly be true. Shinji would rub his eyes once more, trying to see if what he had really saw was actually there, or if it was just a figment of his imagination. Sure enough, the figure disappeared, and Shinji thought that everything was fine for a while. But the next few days, this would only persist more and more. The figure from his dreams would appear, always out of the corner of his eye. He would be there for the faintest of moments. It seemed almost as if this were a force of nature. Something that only Shinji could see, but worst of all, it felt like it was something that only Shinji was meant to see. Eventually, Shinji got to the point where he needed to find out the truth, and while in class, he would excuse himself. Asuka and the others would look towards him to ask if he were alright, but he assured them that everything was fine. As he did so, he carefully snuck out of the school as he went running into the forest. He would continue to chase after the dark shadow, trying to figure out just who or what he was. Shinji's chase eventually leading him into an abandoned factory. As he slowly walked inside, he would look around, trying to see just who or what this being was and just where he had come from. As he did so, Shinji would hear a tapping from behind his back. Shinji would slowly lift his eyes. As he looked up into the rafters themselves, he would see that standing before him was the man from his dreams. As he jumped down, Shinji could see that they were almost the same height, although he had a few inches on them. "And just who are you?" Shinji would ask, preparing to morph at a moment's notice. I didn't know how I would feel when you and I came face to face for the first time. I must say it's a bit cathartic, to say the least, as if this is the universe's own form of irony. Quit dodging the question. Who are you and what do you want with me? I think you know what I want, Ikari. How do you know my name? I know a lot about you. I know you better than you know yourself. You see, you might have everyone else fooled, but you don't fool me. You can never fool me. I know you inside and out. I know the moves you're going to make before you even make them. And actually that's to my advantage, because now we'll see if you can truly live up to those ideals of yours. The being would pull a sword from his side as he pointed it towards Shinji. Well, don't keep me waiting. Why don't you morph and show me what you're capable of? Without hesitating, Shinji would pull out his Zeonizer, morphing into the Zeo Ranger 5 Red. As he donned his power sword, he looked upon the mysterious figure in front of him. He couldn't be sure if this were reality or a dream itself, but he knew one thing was for sure. What he had saw in his dreams, he was not going to let come to pass now. Moving like a red blur, Shinji would proceed forward to the masked figure, their swords colliding inside of the abandoned warehouse, as the two of them began their fight. The more Shinji fought, it felt as though he were fighting someone who were a mere image of himself. The mysterious being was able to block all of Shinji's attacks. He was able to counter him perfectly. Not as though someone who had also been trained in the art of the sword as well, but this was beyond even that. It felt as though Shinji were fighting someone who knew what he was going to do before he even did it. What's the matter, Ikari? You feel as though I can read your mind? Don't make me laugh. You're just that predictable is all. It's just what do you want? What are you even doing here? Who are you? My name? You can call me Kane, if that will suffice. As for what I'm doing here, my goals are far beyond your understanding. I have come to right many wrongs, and I won't make the same mistakes that you did. Kane would continue on his advances, his sword skills now being shown to be that well more than equal to Shinji. As the two of them continued their fight, it seemed as though Shinji were losing the upper hand the more that it continued, keeping him on the back foot for most of it. That was until out of nowhere the doors would burst open inside of the warehouse. Multiple nerfed soldiers, gunned and armed at the ready, being led by Jason, who was in his Gold Ranger form. Moving like a flash of gold, the Gold Ranger would get in between Shinji and Kane, holding up his staff and blocking the sword. I see. So the guest of honor has finally arrived. There's no need to be fighting so early in the morning, you know. I think we could talk this out peaceably. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Jason and Cain would then engage in their own battle. As the soldiers would attempt to shoot him down, Cain was easily able to deflect the bullets, not that he really needed to, while fighting Jason, showing that he had truly become efficient in his fighting style. However, Jason was eventually able to gain the upper hand upon him. Leaving him with not much choice, Cain would decide to leave. However, before doing so, he would look back to Shinji, who was getting back onto his feet, giving him a simple look before disappearing off into the distance. With the fight over, Jason would go to Shinji immediately, checking on him and making sure he was alright. Shinji would assure him that he was fine, and Jason would ask why he didn't call anyone sooner. Shinji tried to explain, but he felt as though it would be a little more complicated. Understanding, Jason would take him to Nerve headquarters immediately, telling him that the others were being picked up and they were going to be on their way soon as well, and that they could talk about it there. To say that everyone were stumped would be a bit of an understatement. After hearing Shinji's story and everything that had happened, they weren't sure what to believe now. Of course, they had always known that Shinji had a thing for visions and dreams, and sometimes they had an eerily high effect of coming true. But even still, a strange, mysterious being that none of them had ever seen before suddenly arrives and just lays waste to everything around them. And even more so, this person from Shinji's dreams now turns out to be real. To say that a few of them were skeptical would be an understatement. It wasn't that they didn't believe Shinji. It was just, if this were true, if Shinji's dreams had some sort of effect on the future, then they weren't sure if this were an advantage or a disadvantage. Had Shinji already set them down a certain path by attacking? Could he have shown and gone another way? There were so many questions that needed answers. For Masato, she wasn't sure what she should do now either. She loved the children and wanted to protect them. Of course, she knew that they were powerful and capable on their own, but all the same, you could say that she had taken a maternal sort of role for all of them. She never wanted to send them into danger without any hope of victory, and she would never expect to just put their lives on the line unless it was absolutely necessary in the first place. If she could avoid them fighting at all costs, then she wanted to do so. All the same, the best thing she could do for now was to move the kids to the headquarters, making that their living arrangements for the time being, allowing them to be protected while they tried to figure out who this Cain guy was and what exactly did he want. As they were debriefing and eventually their meeting came to an end, Asuka would move close to Shinji, asking him if he were alright, before slapping him in the head. Shinji would wince in pain and ask what she were really up to and why she had hit him like that. And Asuka would explain that she was worried about him for doing something so stupid like trying to fight some mystery being on his own. She would point out that they were a team, and more importantly, he was someone who was very close to her. And she didn't want to lose another person that was close to her. Of course, Shinji understood what she meant by this. The two of them had had many long conversations, usually alone and away from everyone else. They had talked about one another's past and what they had gone through, both of them having a similar experience at a young age, losing their mothers due to the project of Evangelion. It was because of this, it was one of the many things that bonded them, that made their love for one another so strong. All the same though, there was a reason why Shinji had kept Asuka away, and even more so why when it came to such things, he tried to be as distant as possible. But he had not told Asuka the one dream that had kept him up at night more than anything, the one that truly frightened him, was a dream that he saw of her. He saw Asuka, battered, bruised, and beaten, inside of Eva Unit 2, surrounded by multiple Evangelions that would stab her with multiple spears of Longinus before ripping her to shreds and killing her. For Shinji, this death was so gruesome and terrifying. He could hear her screams as clearly as he could see her when he was awake. These were dreams that he would not allow to come true, something that he did not want to pass. That was the reason why he had kept to himself for so long. Because Shinji knew that deep down his dreams always had an eerie predictability. And if there was a chance that he could fight against it, he wanted to do so. While the team were in headquarters, the best thing they could do for now was to simply train and try to keep themselves preoccupied. Outside of Rei, the other Rangers were still trying to plan things out for her birthday party. Of course, they wanted to do this for her, since they believed they owed it to her. All the same though, they weren't sure what they were going to do since they were all trapped down here inside in the meantime. Kinsuke would volunteer to try to see if he could poke around and figure out if Rei liked anything at all, but his efforts would usually be in vain as Rei didn't really carry all that much. Speaking of the blue-haired, red-eyed girl, Rei Ayanami would be in their own little area, reading a book. It was a story, a tale that had really drawn to her for some reason. A story of wanting to be human, of desiring that feeling. All the same, Rei Ayanami had undergone a drastic change in her life. She could say with all confidence that she had come to value her comrades and her friends. She had even come to understand Shinji being a brother-like figure to her. Of course, learning of her origin, she couldn't help but feel a familiar bond to Shinji Ikari, being a cloned version of his mother. In a way, it made sense now why she had felt the strong way that she did for Gendo, as well as for Shinji. And ultimately, it made sense why she chose to work with Shinji instead of Gendo in the first place. Although now Rei was dealing with a different problem. She wasn't sure if she were truly Rei Ayanami or if she were Yui Ikari. Was the DNA that she was made with, did that affect the way that she acted all the time? Was she truly herself, or was she just trying to live out Yui's life? These were the focus of her attention, and they were the struggles that she often had to deal with, though she would never voice them aloud. At the same time, familiar faces were now arriving back at Nerve. Two in particular who hadn't been seen in Tokyo 3 for a while. As they made their way to the entrance, they were greeted by both Jason and Masato. It was none other than Kaji and Ritsuko. Ritsuko approached Masato, the two of them exchanging greetings with one another. as they hadn't seen each other since the wedding all that time ago. Of course, Ritsuko had to find her own way in life, with Nerve now being changed for what it was, with Seilei's plans going up in smoke. And then there was her strained relationship with Gendo Ikari. Of course, she too had no idea how to feel about him after his sacrifice. He had been selfish, manipulative in every way, and there were some things she knew that she could never forgive him for. But yet even she was in awe of his sacrifice for his son, and it only made her question the more logical or illogical things in her mind. She could never really explain it. The man that she knew, the Gendo that she knew, would have never sacrificed his own plans and dreams and ambitions for his son, but yet he did. It felt as though it contradicted everything she thought she knew. Ultimately, she decided to take a break and travel alone for a bit. That was until Kaji decided to follow her for some time. Of course, for Kaji, every now and again, he thought about what life could have been like. Sure, in the perfect world, he would have married Masato. But ultimately, he knew that in his line of work, in the life that he truly chose to live, there wasn't much that he could offer her in terms of protection or a stable future. And he could see that Jason was right for her for the most part. So ultimately, he chose to respectfully take his leave, although he returned whenever he felt he were needed to. The reason for their return was twofold. While it was good to see them, Masato knew she needed all hands on deck. She needed to figure out who this Kane person was, and as such, she would debrief them on the situation at hand. While Ritsuko would go to working on the Magi system, to try to see if there were any records or data that she could get on whoever Kane was to begin with, Kaji would stop and visit with Asuka, catching up on the young girl that he had helped take care of some time ago. Asuka was happy to see Kaji again, glad to see that he was doing alright. As they were speaking, Asuka would tell him about her relationship with Shinji and how they were doing, and she would ask if he could talk to him for her. Of course, she would always try to talk to Shinji about his problems, but he had a tendency to be a bit more reserved, and she thought that maybe a man-to-man talk would be what he needed. Kaji agreed, and later on that day, he would find where Shinji was, sitting alone with his Sadat player, listening to the same two tracks as always, whenever he was trying to make sense of things in his mind. Kaji would move over to Shinji, and the two of them would catch up with one another. Kaji checking in, asking in on him, seeing how you were doing after all. For Shinji, he would try to explain what he was going through, the whole Kane situation and such. But eventually it came to the point of his dreams. Feeling as though he could say this in confidence, he would tell Kaji about what he had dreamt with Asuka, of seeing her death, and of being afraid by that. Kaji now understood how Shinji felt and what he was going through. He would look and tell him that, for the most part, it was alright to be afraid. He feared of losing someone that was closest to him, and after everything that he had gone through, he couldn't help but sympathize with the matter. Even though, despite everything up until now, Kaji would express that he had the full utmost confidence in Shinji. He was the boy that helped save the world, and he believed that no matter what, they could endure anything as long as they stuck together. With that, he would leave him with this. He would tell that Asuka had never had the easiest of lives. But ever since they had met one another, she had changed in ways that he had always hoped she would. And he believed that if there was anyone who he could have confidence in that would save and protect her when the time came, it was him. And with that, he would take his leave, and Shinji would be left alone, left to ponder these things. Meanwhile, as night fell over the city, Cain would make his way to Nerve. He would seemingly bypass all security, knowing the codes, knowing the ins and outs and where to get to, almost as if he had been here before. As he descended the lower levels of Nerve headquarters, going undetected, it would seem as though he were having a conversation with himself, as if there were two beings within him at once. Are you sure you wish to do this? But of course, this is the only way after all. I must say, you humans are something else. You think so? I know so. You court with death on a daily basis. You fight for things you cannot understand. Even now, you nearly survived one Armageddon, and yet now you intend to start another. You could say that. But I look at it a different way. The world we live in now is nothing but a lie. So there's no point in wasting time trying to save it. The only thing that's real is what's in front of me. My goal. As they made their way deeper inside, they would find a private chamber, one that had gone undetected for some time. As they made their way within, Cain would open the chamber door, and within, he would find the item that he had come to search for. It would be a pod that had the inscription, Embryo EU1B. With this, I will lay the foundation for the new world, and I will finally achieve what they could not. So, this is the fate of humanity. This was always the fate of humanity. I'm merely bringing it to the forefront. Well, this will definitely be intriguing to see what will happen when man tries to play God. The next day, the children would be in class. Shinji again wouldn't really be paying much attention to what the teacher was saying. It was decided that they would still go to school, but instead of going back home, they would go straight to Nerve headquarters. While they were there, everything seemed fine until an alarm would go off. But this was no ordinary alarm. It was one that was all too familiar, and everyone that heard it was stunned and left in absolute silence. For you see, whenever this alarm went off, it meant that an angel had been detected. Something that shouldn't have been possible, since all of the angels were destroyed. Everyone would make their way outside immediately, while the other students and staff were going off to safety. Shinji and the other Rangers were heading back to headquarters as soon as possible, as the building started to fall underground. For Toji, the last thing he wanted to do was deal with another angel attack, seeing as how they barely survived the battle with the generals. Thankfully though, his sister and his family had moved out of the city a while ago. He chose to stay since he was a ranger, so there wasn't much to deal with on that regard. But still, angel battles could be pretty messy, and he should know from experience that those you care about could easily get hurt. Everyone else along with him were filled with nothing but confusion. Eventually they made their way to the headquarters, where Masato would debrief them on everything that was happening. And it wasn't looking good. To their horror, it wasn't just one angel that they had to deal with. It was 4. But these 4 were particular of all of the angels that had been summoned. And Shinji recognized them well, along with everyone else. Of the 4 angels that had been brought back, the first one was the first angel that Shinji fought when he arrived at Tokyo 3 and entered into Eva Unit 1. His first angel battle had now come back to life. The second was the dual split angel, the angel with the ability to split its body into 2. That was the angel that required both Shinji and Asuka to work together in unison to defeat. The third one, almost as if adding insult to injury, was technically Eva Unit 3, or Angel 13. The one that almost got Toji killed all that time ago. And then there was Angel 15. When Asuka realized which one that was, a tinge of fear would enter into her. For you see, Angel 15 was the mental angel, the one that almost destroyed her mind, leaving it in an unrecognized state. Masato would have to organize the Rangers at once. With Jason helping in that regard, they decided they would use the Super Zeo Zords this time around, allowing them for individual combat, but they could come together as one if they needed to. While Jason would stand on guard with Pure Midas near the base, the Rangers would all morph into action. As the Zeo Rangers head out, they would enter into their Super Zeo Zords, heading off into the city now that was in its defensive state, as they engaged with the angels. Shinji would take point, going up against the first angel he had ever fought. For many, you could say that this was the ultimate rematch of sorts, as Asuka would go on to face the 15th angel. In the meantime, both Kinsuke and Toji would take on the Split Angel, believing that they had the perfect coordination to take it down, while Rei would focus her attentions on the 13th angel. As they engaged in combat, the Zords working efficiently against the ethereal beings. Off in the distance, Kane would be sitting on a rooftop watching the battle take place. Well, it seems they're moving just as you said they would. But of course, I do know them pretty well after all. They're very predictable. Is there really a reason behind all of this? You could say so. I merely wish to see what they're capable of. Them or yourself. You know me all too well. As the battles continued, the Rangers seemed to be holding their own against the Angels just fine. However, back at headquarters, both Masato and Ritsuko were at their wits' end. How on earth had the Angels managed to come back when they had been destroyed and defeated all that time ago? It shouldn't have even been possible. And yet, here they were. All the same, the only thing they could do now was coordinate with the Rangers, giving them any sort of aid that they could from the sidelines. Thankfully, the Rangers were able to hold their own, and they were able to take down the Angels, although there was something peculiar about them. It was really their color scheme. While all the Angels were different, they were colored the same. A dark black with patterns of purple and green upon them. For Shinji, he felt a strong familiarity with them, as if not just the Angels themselves, but he felt as though there was something close, something that he knew. It was a feeling deep within him, although he just wasn't sure of what it was or what it could be. All the same, the Rangers would stay on guard, and one by one the Angels would be defeated once again. Although, strangely enough, the cores were not among them when they were destroyed. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, the Angels would reappear once again, as if they hadn't been destroyed in the first place. Catching the Rangers off guard one by one, they would defeat the Super Zeo Zords, destroying them instantly, as the Rangers had no choice but to eject themselves. However, Shinji had not been attacked in that moment, but his reckoning was only but upon him. As the moment he turned around, his sensors would detect a new enemy. As a large fist was punched to his chest, Shinji would look up, everyone else watching on. The commanders back at Nerve, Jason standing on defense, realizing that he had to leave as soon as possible. For the being in front of Shinji was an old friend, if you will. One that he thought was long since destroyed. Standing before Shinji was none other than Eva Unit 1, back from the dead. The Evangelion would tear Shinji's Zord apart, forcing him to eject as well. As everyone lay on the ground trying to collect themselves, Kane would appear before them, everyone now seeing him for the first time. They would prepare themselves for battle, as Kane looked upon the Rangers. It warms my heart to see you again. All the same, I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. I've only come here for one thing. Kane would lift up his sword, pointing it towards Rei. Shinji, however, would take the front, guarding his friends with his power sword at the ready. You're not taking Rei. You're not taking any of them. Oh, Shinji, the boy who wants it all. You want to defend your friends. You want to save the world. But when are you going to realize you simply can't have everything you want? A sacrifice must be made. Before the Rangers could even respond, Kane would arrive in front of them, attacking them and knocking them all in various directions. The Rangers would band together and attempt to take him down, but it seemed as though, just like before, He knew all of their moves. He was able to calculate what they were going to do before they did it, and he found the most best and efficient way to take them out. For Kinsuke, he was a long-range fighter at heart, preferring to shoot from a distance, so Kane easily closed the gap between them, rendering him immobile first. Toji was the strength of the team, relying on his athleticism and his natural feel for fighting. Among them all, he actually was the one with the most tenacity. However, all the same, Kane disposed of him as well. For Asuka and Shinji, while they were capable fighters in their own right, their strength came in piloting, so while on the ground, Kane held the advantage. As he continued to work through all of them, Rei would try to fight as well, but Kane would merely brush her aside every time. Rei wasn't sure if it were just her, but she felt as though she could sense a presence within Kane, one that wasn't human, at least not fully. If she didn't know any better, she could have sworn that he was an angel as well, which was only confirmed all the more when the moment Shinji tried to attack him, he activated his own AT field, repelling the Red Ranger. Asuka would attempt to go in for another strike. However, as she tried to do so, Kane would easily disarm her, as her primary weapon was the power shield, holding her by the throat in the air. "Let her go! Don't do this!" Kane would look into the eyes of Asuka Langley Soryu. "You know, in another life, maybe." Without saying anything more, he would stab his blade through her, throwing her to the ground, as Shinji felt as though his mind was going to break. As he ran towards Asuka's side, cradling her in his arms, he looked up to Kane, his vision becoming filled with tears and with rage. As Kane made his way over to Rei Ayanami, he would knock her out swiftly before picking her up and leaving. "Don't worry, Shinji. I still have use for you. I just have to make preparations. But we will see each other again. I promise." With that, Kane would disappear with Rei, as Shinji and the Rangers were left in the rubble and destruction of the battle. Ava Unit 1 and the 4 Angels would disappear. Before long, Jason would arrive, along with a medical team as well as more combat staff. Asuka was rushed to the infirmary immediately, while the other Rangers were taken in for their wounds to be checked as well. However, for Shinji, he truly didn't care about his wounds at that time. It really didn't matter to him at all. In just one day, he had seemingly lost everything. The girl that he loved. The girl that he had come to know as his sister and family. It felt as though everything was being torn apart and taken away from him. He wasn't sure what to do in that moment. As he waited outside of the infirmary hall, his arm bandaged and having a few more injuries checked over. It would have been best for him to stay in his own medical room, but honestly, he didn't want to. He didn't bother to eat or sleep. He simply sat outside waiting and hoping. Eventually the doctors would arrive from out of the room. Thankfully, Asuka was out of the clear when it came to any life-threatening injury. But for now, she was going to have to recover, and there was no telling when she'd be able to fight again. As Shinji walked into the room, he would see her lying peacefully in bed. He cursed himself for his own idiocy, for not being there for her when she needed him most. As he held her hand through the night, Shinji found himself being swallowed by his own fear and his own regret. For everyone involved, they knew that despite everything that happened, the worst was still yet to come. Rei would slowly awaken in the darkness, unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. She would find that she were trapped inside of a cage, and her morpher had been taken from her, set aside on a table across the room. As she awoke, a door would open, and Cain would make his way inside. Where am I? You're on the outskirts of Tokyo 3. This is a city that was long since abandoned, about 20 years ago. Why have you brought me here? That is the question, isn't it? To be honest, I don't even know where to begin. But I guess if I have to start anywhere, we should start with this. Cain would remove his mask, his helmet, if you will. Coming face to face with Rei, she could now see who it was that they had been fighting. On one hand, it didn't make any sense to her at all, but as she gazed upon his face, suddenly it made all the sense in the world. In the meantime, Asuka would be recovering in the infirmary. It had taken 3 days, but she was actually able to awaken a lot sooner than anyone was expecting. Even her body was recovering at a much faster rate. No one could fully understand just how this had happened. Many chalked it up to the children having extraordinary power that allowed them to recover from fatal wounds a lot better than the average human. Ritsuko noted that it might have been due to the events of the final battle with the generals, when the children absorbed some of the power of Lilith inside of them, the power of the angel itself. Perhaps some of that power was still inside of them, sort of protecting them in a way. No one could really make too much out of it, but for the most part, they were just happy that she was alright. Of course, it was still a bittersweet feeling, as they were still trying to find where Rei had been taken. For Shinji, he wanted to save her no matter what. She was his family after all. But all the same, they weren't sure where to begin their search. They weren't even sure of what Cain was after to begin with. Although if Rei was taken, then it had to mean something, and Ritsuko feared the worst. After all, Rei was supposed to play a vital role during the events of Third Impact, if it were to have taken place. And with that on their mind, they knew that whatever Cain had in store for them, it seemed as though the Evangelion and the remaining project of Third Impact might come into play. As Shinji was taking a nap, he would find himself entering into yet another dream. As he did so this time, he would be in the abandoned city, far off on the outskirts of Tokyo 3, and standing there would be none other than Cain. "You can speak to me through my dreams, can't you?" So you finally figured it out. Congratulations. Why are you doing this? Why are you coming after us? Where did you take Ray? I think the answer should be rather obvious, don't you think? You recognize the city, don't you? It's on the outskirts of Tokyo 3, isn't it? It is. But this place has great significance, don't you know? You see, a certain experiment was held here long ago. An experiment that would change your life forever. You mean this was where... Bingo. This was where Gendo Ikari first attempted to use the Evangelion. This is the site where your mother died. But why here? What does this have to do with anything? Shinji, I have my own goals in this lifetime. You and I are a lot alike, you could say. And the simple fact of the matter is, what I plan to do is to right a wrong. But sadly, I lack the power to do it at the moment. But that is where you come in. Meet me here in 3 days' time. Tell no one where you are going. If you want Ray, you can have her. You just have to come take her from me. Don't keep me waiting. With that, Shinji would awaken in his room. As he slowly walked out, he would walk past everyone through the headquarters of Nerve. Eventually, he would come across Jason, who was also making the rounds as well. The two of them stopped and talked for a brief moment. Jason looking after his student after all, the boy of whom he had trained ever since he came to this world. He was proud of Shinji, proud of him for what he had become, for becoming his own man and walking his own path. But he was always able to tell when something was troubling him. Something seems to be on your mind, Shinji. Do you wish to talk about it? I don't know, Jason. You're worried about Ray, aren't you? I mean, yeah, of course I am. It just seems like every time I find something that is of value to me, it's like it's just ripped away from me in that instance. And I hate it. I hate it so much. My father, when my mother was taken in by the Eva, it was as if, I don't know. It was at that moment our relationship was never the same. He put himself into everything else except for me. He didn't care. He only called me back to use me for his own gains. In the end, he was no better than Sele. To be honest, I still don't know how I should feel about him. And yet still, he gave his life for me. Although, I don't know if he did it because he wanted to, or if because he was just doing what the Evangelion wanted him to do. And yet now look at where we are. Eva Unit 1's returned, and it's responsible for so much destruction. You feel responsible, don't you? Shinji, you don't bear the fate of the world on your own. We all stand beside you, and we will fight with you. Remember that. No one ranger can do it alone. It's only when we work together that we can truly overcome the obstacles before us. As long as you remember that, and as long as you have hope, then we will always have a chance. But what if the worst can happen, Shinji? I think I'm living proof of that. But even still, we have something that not many other people do. We have the strength to keep going, the strength to keep fighting, the strength to stand and move on. As long as we do that, then there's nothing that we can't achieve. Jason would pat Shinji on the back. In a way, Jason was like the father that Shinji wished he had, and for that he would always be grateful, which only made what he had to do next all the more difficult. As the next few days passed, Shinji would prepare himself. He knew what he was going to do, and he knew how foolish and stupid it was. But this was something he felt he needed to do, and there was simply no other way out. Before leaving, though, he would visit with Kinsuke and Toji, as they were recovering as well. He spoke with his friends for a while. He took the time to thank them for being there for him from the very beginning, even if their relationship didn't get off to the best of starts. And they echoed the same sentiment. Sure, they were known as the Three Stooges, but they were still the best of friends, and Shinji couldn't ask for better rangers to fight beside. As he left them, they both thought it was a bit weird that Shinji was acting like this was the last time they were going to see one another, but they didn't make much of it. Shinji would then go to Misato's office, the two of them enjoying a cup of coffee together. While there, Shinji would reflect on when he first came to Tokyo 3. How, since he never really grew up with his mother, he didn't fully understand that relationship or what it felt like. But he felt as though he could say deep down, Misato was like the mother that he wished he could have had. Of course, she would blush a little for Shinji to get all sentimental with her, but Shinji was serious. He would give Misato a hug and tell her that he was grateful for everything she had done for him, that he truly did see her as his mother, and he was thankful for her being in his life. Misato would hug Shinji back, as she felt the same way. Shinji was like the son that Misato never had, and she was happy and grateful for him all the same. As he left her, there was only one more place that he had to stop to see. He would visit where Asuka was still recovering some. Her long red hair running down her shoulders as she lay peacefully in bed, sound asleep. Shinji would sit beside her. He wasn't going to be long, but he wanted to say what was on his mind. You know, Asuka, when I first met you, I thought that you were the biggest bitch on the planet. You were always mean to me. You always said some of the nastiest things, and sometimes I wondered who on earth would be stupid enough to fall in love with a girl like you. Well, now I guess I have my answer, don't I? You're probably going to hate me for what I'm going to do. To be honest, when you wake up, I might not be here anymore. But even still, I wanted to say this. I don't regret any decision I've made. Sure, my life's been full of hardships, but whose hasn't? I have to say that I am sorry I might not be able to keep my promise to you. But all the same, I'm happy that you are in my life. I'd rather struggle with you than try to seek perfection where there is none. We aren't perfect. We're flawed human beings. We're flawed creatures in every way. But even still, I find beauty in your flaws. What you think is your weakness, I find to be your greatest strength. And I hope that I do make it back. Because if it's alright with you, I want to keep walking down this path with you, no matter how hard it might be. I just hope that one day we'll be where we need to be. And with that, Shinji would stand and kiss her forehead for what he believed might have been the final time. He would wait until the security was laxed around Nerve. As he grabbed his morpher, he would slowly make his descent outside of headquarters before hopping onto a motorbike and speeding forward to the outskirts of Tokyo 3, to an abandoned city long since forgotten. As he made his way into the city, Shinji instinctively knew where he needed to go. He wasn't sure of how, he could just sense it. And before long, he found himself in front of a building that served as a memorial, a place where his family died a long time ago. As he took a deep breath, he would walk to the front door and open as he made his way inside into the darkness. As he made his way through the building, his memories started to come back to him. He started to remember everything of his past. The day his mother disappeared. The day his father gave up on him. The day that his family was torn apart. Until eventually he made his way to the roof. And there he saw her, Rei Ayanami, chained to a metal-like cross, and standing before her was none other than Cain. Well, it seems you finally arrived, Shinji. Although I expected no less from you. I imagine so. You mind letting her go? She doesn't have to suffer if I'm the one you're after. Oh, you will suffer in due time. But Rei, she's a different matter. You see, I need her, actually. As Cain walked towards her, he would plunge his fist into her chest, causing her to scream in agony and pain. Shinji yelled for him to stop, but just then he could feel the ground beginning to rumble and shake around them. As from out of the sky, they saw something hurling towards the city itself, landing in the center. It was something that Shinji never thought that he would see. It was the Spear of Longinus, the tool, an instrument for which to start Third Impact. It became very clear now that this was what he was after, but that still left the question of why. Why was he after this? Why did he want this? Cain finally removed his helmet as he revealed his identity to Shinji. What Shinji saw was something that he didn't even think was possible. The boy standing before him, it was Shinji Ikari. But something was different. The right side of his face appeared normal, even his hair. But the left side was a completely different story. His left eye was red, and the left side of his hair was pure white, almost like Kaoru's hair. "Who are you?" Shinji would ask. "Isn't it obvious? I am you." "But how is that even... I guess if I have to be more specific, I should say that I am you from another reality, from another world. You see, I am you from the original world." "The original world?" "I believe I am the original world, and I believe you are the fake. You see, this version of Shinji Ikari was from the original universe, a world where Shinji never became a Zeo Power Ranger, a world where Shinji never overcame his fears or his inner demons, a world that had truly gone to hell, ravaged by third impact. You see, I had nothing, Shinji. I had nothing, and yet I wanted it all. I want the power of God for myself, so that I can shape the world the way I want it to be. True perfection. I bonded with the angel Kaori, and he gave me this power. He showed me your world, and I knew that it was there that I would obtain what I was looking for." "You mean, because you couldn't save your own world, you just came here to destroy mine?" "Precisely. After all, why wouldn't I? You annoy me in every way, shape, and form. I hate everything about you. I hate who you are. I hate what you stand for. Your smug attitude, the way you think that you can just save everyone, it truly annoys me. Just what makes you think you have the right, huh? You think you're better than me? You think you have a right to a better life? Don't make me laugh. No matter how hard you try to change, you're still the same as I am. You are a pathetic coward, a weakling. And I'm going to prove it." Kane would don his helmet once more and draw his sword. Shinji would morph as well into the Red Zeo Ranger, pulling out his sword. It now suddenly became clear to him why this battle was so difficult. From the very beginning, he never stopped to realize that he was truly in a fight with himself. As they clashed on the rooftop, back in Tokyo 3, Nerve headquarters would get the immediate signal of a foreign object arriving on Earth. Ritsuko and Misato and everyone else, they couldn't believe that the Spear of Longinus had returned back to Earth, and even more so, that Shinji had disappeared. Although thanks to the satellites they were able to see where he was and what he was doing. He was with Rei, who was being held captive, as he was engaging in battle with Kane on the rooftop. Seeing this and being alerted at once, Jason would take the other Rangers, heading out immediately to Pyramidas. With the Super Zeo Zords now destroyed, they were only left with the original Zeo Zords. They were all stored inside of Pyramidas, and leaving at once, they would fly off to the outskirts of Tokyo 3, to the abandoned city where the final battle was taking place. Asuka, with a look of worry on her face, hoping that Shinji could make it long enough until they got there. In the meantime, the battle between Shinji and Kane was intensifying. Their blows now more even than they were before. Shinji filled with a strong sense of hatred and anger towards his doppelganger. You seem to really be into this fight, Shinji. Is it getting to you? It is. I hate everything about you. But yet I understand you. Understand? Don't make me laugh, Shinji. You can't understand me. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what I've been through. But I do. I felt everything. I know you did. And I felt everything you had as well. For all of my suffering, the only thing that I could feel in my times of distress were your accomplishments. It was as if the universe was trying to mock me. Every time I failed, every time I faltered, it seemed as though you were right there, shoving your happiness in my face. Are you so vindictive that you would hate your own being? But of course, why wouldn't I? I have no problem doing so. I'll take you out, along with this pathetic world, and I will make a new one for myself. As they continued their battle, the building seeming as though it were going to collapse at any moment, their fight only intensified more and more. The two of them now being able to read one another in and out, it became hard to see where either one could gain the advantage. Ultimately, as it seemed as though they were going to fall, Shinji would move over to free Rei, taking her to safety, making sure to grab her morpher before it was too late. As they moved over to another rooftop, they could see that Kane was still in pursuit of them. Shinji would move to get Rei to safety as he continued his fight against his doppelganger. In the meantime, Pyramidas would touch down. However, once it did so, the four angels that had been used by Kane for his own devices would re-emerge at once. Jason would allow the Rangers to escape, as Pyramidas would transform into its Megazord-type structure, engaging with the four angels in combat. Pyramidas was one of the strongest of the Zeozords, and was more than capable of holding its own, as Jason alerted the Rangers to go and back up Shinji. They would do so at once, all of them morphing together, as they went rushing to the battle scene. As Rei would regain her strength, as well as having her morpher close at hand, she would see Shinji continuing to struggle against Kane, as it seemed as though he might have gained the upper hand. That was until a flash of green would appear between the two of them, with Toji delivering a right hook to his face, knocking him to the ground. Kensuke from a distance, with his specially made sniper rifle, would take multiple shots at Kane, shooting him in the face until eventually his helmet began to crack and break apart. And then suddenly, everyone else would now see what Shinji was fighting against. For some of them, they couldn't believe that this were actually true, but indeed it was. They now all got to see that they were fighting against none other than Shinji Ikari himself. The real Shinji would explain to them that this was his doppelganger, from a world that had gone wrong. He had merged with the power of the final angel, and used that power to travel to their world. He was attempting to start Third Impact once again for himself, to steal the power, just like his father and like Seele had tried to in the past, and that the only chance of victory was to stop him here and now. Kane would just continue to laugh maniacally as he looked upon them all, his laughter, although mixed with sadness. In any other moment, he would be happy. He would be happy to see his friends. All the ones he had lost along the way were all gathered here. But they weren't here for him. They were here to destroy him. And because of that, this filled him with an immense sense of anger and sadness. As he raised his saber into the sky, he would merely usher them forward. As the 5 Zeo Rangers would charge together as one, the final battle would begin. The Zeo Rangers working together would attempt to take Cain down once and for all, and they were making progress. Both Shinji and Asuka standing back to back, Asuka with her shield to block, and Shinji with his sword to attack. As Rei would use her own Zeo Nunchaka, striking away at Cain at various points of his body, rendering him immobile for a few moments. Toji, using his dual power axes, would hack away at his armor plating once more, while Kinsuke would attack from a long distance, shooting at his various weak points over and over again. The Zeo Rangers were able to do great damage to him, eventually knocking him to the point where he knew he needed to gain the upper hand. The angels that Jason was battling would disappear, before reappearing where the fight between the Zeo Rangers and Cain was taking place. The Rangers would move out of the way and try to get as far as they could, as the angels went hacking away and destroying everything around them, allowing enough time for Cain to summon Eva Unit 1 to his side once again. As he entered inside of the Evangelion, he would make his way towards the Spear of Longinus. Jason would tell the other Rangers to stay put, as Pyramidas would arrive on the scene, continuing his fight with the 4 angels once more. He would leave Cain to the other Rangers, and from there, the Zeo Zords would emerge from Pyramidas, each Ranger getting inside of their Zord, as they came together to form the Zeo Megazord. With Shinji and the others leading the charge, they would make their way to where Cain was with the Spear of Longinus, as he turned back towards them. It all comes down to this. I've come too far to stop now. My plans, my dreams, my ambitions. I am going to make a new world, one free of pain and suffering. Why try and stop me? You know as well as I that this world will never last. The time will come, the time where you'll wish you had sided with me. Shinji, however, would not be persuaded by his words. As everyone joined together as one, they would summon their sword at once, as Cain with Eva Unit 1 would take the Spear of Longinus. The 2 mechas would engage in the final battle, everyone working together, blocking against the Evangelion. Both Shinji and Asuka would lead the charge, for out of all of them, they were the best pilots of both Evangelion and of Zords. If there was anyone that knew how to counter and fight one, it would be them, and everyone would follow their lead. For Cain, as he continued to hack away and try to stab at them, it felt as though he weren't making any progress at all. Both Shinji and Asuka were able to overcome him in everything that he could throw. You can't hold me off forever. Why won't you just let me cut you down? He would raise the spear into the sky and bring it forth, planning to skewer them through the chest. However, they would manage to hold the sword, angling it perfectly and knocking the spear from out of his hand. The 2 mechs would then engage in an all-out slugfight, each one taking a punch and receiving damage. However, neither one would give in to the other. Before long, it seemed as though either one could come out on top, as destruction surrounded them all. Both sides would look towards the spear of Longinus as they reached out towards it at the same time. The arm of the Zord and the arm of the Evangelion would both grab it at once at the hilt. And in doing so, a great flash of light would emanate and surround them all. At that moment, Shinji Ikari would awaken. There would be two of them. They would both be sitting in front of one another. They did not know where they were, how they had entered into this void. One Shinji had brown hair, and the other white. So this is it then. I believe it is. What do we do now? Simple. Only one of us can leave here. Only one of us can fulfill the dream. And what exactly does that mean? You know what it means, Shinji. We both are opposing wills. We both cannot exist in the same era of time. It seems as though for one of us, we will be destroyed. Only the real Shinji Ikari can leave here. And that will be me. The white-haired Shinji would lunge forward at the brown-haired one, grabbing him by the throat and holding him down as he tried to choke the life out of him. That's it. Just die already. Just die. I am the real Shinji Ikari. I will be the one that lives. While the brown-haired Shinji would fight away, continuing to hold on. The two of them, their battle, being more than just a fight for survival, but it was a fight for one's own identity, a fight for their own self-worth. As Shinji fought against his doppelganger, he reflected on his life, on every moment that brought him here. He saw everything. He saw all of the decisions that he could have made, all the moments where he could have faltered, where he could have been weak. He saw the decisions that he made, and he saw the decisions that his doppelganger made. The moments where he should have been brave, he was weak. The moments where he should have been courageous, he was cowardly. The moments where he should have forgave, he gave in the wrath. He saw all of his faults, all of his lowest points. As he saw everything and all at once, he realized now more than ever that he was satisfied. He was satisfied with his life, with how everything had turned out. This world, no matter how flawed it was his own, and he was not going to let it be destroyed. At that moment, he felt as though he were being pushed forward, as if there were multiple hands behind him, not allowing him to stumble. As Shinji stood forward, he would push his doppelganger off of him. As Kane came running back towards Shinji once again, Shinji would punch him in the face and knock him down. Kane continued to get back up over and over again, only to be knocked down once more, never being able to gain the upper hand, until eventually Shinji, through his mere force of an AT field, was able to blow him back. And before them both, there stood the spear of Longinus. Shinji would make his way grabbing the spear, and as he felt it, he felt the immense power flowing through him. As Kane looked up to him in horror, he yelled at him to give it back, to give him the spear, that he wasn't worthy of that power, that the power of God belonged to him. Only he could shape the new world. However, Shinji would simply shake his head. You never loved yourself. You never once thought that you had the power to do anything on your own. You sought validation from everyone, and you chose the coward's way out. You talk about me as if I'm not you. Don't try to deny it. I am you in every way, shape, and form. You're right. You are me. You're the me that I could have been. And I will say for that, I am grateful. I am grateful because you are a person that I never want to become. You gave up. I did not. And now you must live with the decisions that you have made. No. No. There would fall an ultimate silence as the world returned back to what it had become. The screams of Cain would fade away, and as Jason turned from the blinding light, as the four angels he were battling had now disappeared, he saw one being standing over the other. And as the dust settled and the smoke cleared, it was the Zeo Megazord standing tall, the spear of Longinus stabbed through the chest of Ava Unit 1. As they did so, the Evangelion would start to fade and disappear, until eventually it was gone. With the spear of Longinus now in hand, the Zeo Megazord would raise it high into the sky. Before taking one last lunge, it would throw it out of Earth's atmosphere, launching it far past even the moon. The spear would continue to travel on and onward, and it would fly off into the darkness of space until the end of time, leaving mankind forever. Life would seemingly go back to normal for Shinji and the others. As they finished their time in grade school, with their final year before high school would eventually fall upon them, they looked forward to the future and to everything life had in store for them in the meantime. The world was slowly being rebuilt, and soon, the dawn of a new hope would be upon them all. As everyone had gathered together, the surprise party for Rei Ayanami had gone off well than expected, as Rei was surrounded by those whom cared for her. A small change in her face would start to form, and she would actually begin to smile. A genuine smile had come across her face, and she thanked them all for being there for her. As they all celebrated together happily, Shinji would be looking out the window as the sun was starting to set upon the city, as Asuka would stand next to him. As she did so, the first thing she did was pinch him in the face, Shinji yelling out in pain as he wondered why Asuka would do something like that. Although she threatened she should have done a lot worse for him doing something so foolish, to try to run off on his own and save the world, thinking that he was some type of hotshot and forgetting that they were a team. Shinji knew he had that coming, and despite having spent all day apologizing, he knew that he was going to have to apologize again and again and then some. However, the pain was quickly replaced with a strong sense of warmth and comfort as she kissed him on the cheek that she had pinched. For Shinji, as he looked around, as he saw all of his friends together happily, he couldn't help but feel as though this was the world that he needed to be in. This was where he belonged. Sure, this world wasn't perfect. No world could ever be. Where there was joy, there was going to be pain. Where there was victory, there would always be defeat. These were simply the laws of nature, and nothing could change that. But all the same, life was what you made it. Life was only as rich and fulfilling as you chose for it to be. No one could ever truly escape the darkness of life at times. We are all bogged down by its anxieties. But even still, we do not have to be consumed by those anxieties. As long as we remember what is most important, as long as we hold on to hope and to fate itself, then even through the darkest of nights, there will always be a bright tomorrow.